Hi, everyone. We are doing a class today on fabric and upcycling, and our instructor is Nellie Werger, and I will let her introduce herself and we'll get started.
Hi. So I'm 62 years old, and I have been being a seamstress of one kind or another my whole life. My grandmother taught me how to sew when I was 8 years old. So being a cheapskate like I am, sourcing fabric has always been a problem. I worked at several Ren Fests. I worked back in the 70s. I worked at King Richard's and at Minneapolis, and both of those were very strict about garb and authenticity and all of that. I've also been a singer, magical groups, theater, SCA, Civil War reenactors, colonial and pioneer reenactors, Regency balls, and my grandmother, who taught me how to drape, was she was in theater. She and my grandfather had a musical on Broadway in 1948. But I also grew up at a time when we thought they were going to drop the bomb next week. And I wanted to have all of the skills that I needed to be a proper pioneer. So I learned how to do everything. I learned how to crochet, weave, knit, spin, harvest plants, shear sheep, you know it. You do it, yeah, I know it. And part of that is a fascination with history, and part of that is a fascination with just how people did things. So I have some pictures. I'm going to go to screen sharing at this point because I want you to be able to see what it is that I've spent my life doing. And let's see if I can bear with me for just a minute. Okay. And here. Okay. Okay. Hopefully this is a hopefully this is on here.
It's looking good on my end.
Okay, great. Thanks. And so this dress is actually something that I did. It's actually made from sheets. It's entirely made from, I think they were really ugly sheets, but they make a pretty nice Renaissance dress. Renaissance-esque. Yeah, this is my magical group from back in the early 80s. And I've learned a lot since then. This is me down in the corner with the red hat on. And I made, I'd say 80% of those costumes. Many of them are made out of prom dresses and curtains and whatever I could get my hands on. Again, this is a colonial reenaction, and this is a theater piece that I did. It's the Magic Flute, actually. So it's fantasy, Renaissance-ish. I do a lot of that. Now, this is the inspiration. I've always been a history buff, and I'm fascinated with Renaissance art. When I was a teenager, this is my bedroom wall. These pictures were on my bedroom wall, covered with postcards, most of them from the Met. If you've never been to the Costume Institute and the Met, you should go. Anyway, the dress on the right is roughly inspired the dress in the middle here. But mostly I make things because I enjoy it. I'm currently costuming 3 shows. One of them is called Song of Singapore, which is set in 1942. One of them is Hansel and Gretel, which is fantasy Renaissance-ish with steampunk splashes. And the last one is Kiss Me Kate, which is Shakespeare set into the 1940s. So the Shakespeare part of the play is pretty Shakespearean, but it's Shakespeare costume as interpreted by people in the 1940s, which gives me a lot of freedom, to be honest. None of them are accurate Renaissance, but 2 of them are definitely Renaissance inspired. If any of you saw Kate's presentation last month, I love her definitions. Historically accurate, historically adequate, historically inspired. And I would add pure on fantasy right off the top of that. I've only ever worked truly historically accurately for Civil War era costumes. The rest of the time, it's the other three. And my adequacy has gotten considerably more and more adequate. So that being said, I want to talk about fabrics. When you source your fabrics, you want to be intentional about where on your historical accuracy to fantasy continuum you want to be. And then evaluate the fabric in terms of look, function and feel, fiber content, weave, pattern, and color. Now, to be truly historically accurate, you need to nail down your time period. That's why the Civil War ones are easy to do. We know exactly what those fabrics are. I've actually gone to a costume museum and looked at a Civil War officer's coat with an eye to how it was made. Sewing machines, by the way. But all the buttonholes were done by hand. I think it was 42 buttonholes by hand. But the Tudor and Renaissance period, which is kind of where we're looking at, is mostly linen, wool, some silk, the hand embroidery, very rarely cotton. And needless to say, all of these fabrics, if you buy them made, if you can find them made, are expensive or incredibly time consuming if you make them yourself. I pick up linens and wool when I see them in thrift stores, and it's pretty accurate to say that the linen that you get, if you buy a linen suit at the thrift store and remake it into a Renaissance coat, which I do all the time, it's not the same linen. It's not going to be that close, but at least you can say it's linen, right? I do really like to make the undergarments and shifts that go under every costume. Every costume I make pretty much, every historical costume I make pretty much has a usually linen shift or chemise underneath it. This has to do with the fact that I'm really cheap and I don't want to dry clean my costumes. If you can change your chemise every day, you can actually go out to a hot festival and have a grand dime, and you get back and you can wash the chemise and alcohol spray your outfit, and you don't have to take it to the cleaners. But after the point of linen and wool is expensive too. Actually, wool is not as hot as you might think. But from there you go into historically accurate enough. So when you start looking at thrift stores, you can find a lot of brocades and velvets and beautiful rich fabrics, a lot of synthetics or synthetic blends, mimic the look of more expensive fabrics. I mean, you can't actually get, well, you can get silk velvet these days, but you can't get very much of it. It's very, very expensive. And machine embroidery and stuff like that. Most fabrics, you can tell by the way it feels. When you go into a fabric store or into a thrift store and you want to evaluate a fabric, sometimes they have labels, which is always good, but B, use all your senses. Raw silk, for instance, has a distinct odor. I don't care how many times it's been washed, it always has a distinct odor. So does wet wool. If you really need to know, you can take a few threads off the edge of a fabric and hold a match to it. Synthetics will curl and smell funny. Wool doesn't burn and smells like burning hair. Cotton and rayon and most of those smell like burning leaves. So you're using all your senses to evaluate, and then take the fabric, hold it up, and see how it drapes. See if it's going to actually do what you want it to do. Because it's all about the look. So I went to a thrift store last week, And I decided I just kind of take you guys on a tour of what I find. So this is the first thing. Let's see. So this is going to sound kind of weird, kind of woo in a weird kind of way, but fabric speaks to me. It tells me what it can be. It tells me what it wants to be. And here's my impressions of a recent tour of the Volunteers of America thrift store in Columbus. That's the closest big city to me. So these stripes, this is a heavy cotton upholstery fabric. And I took one look at this and I said, you know, I don't really like it the way it is. But what I really want to do is I want to cut it apart. I want to cut the stripes apart and use like just the red stripes as a trim, or just the green stripes, or just the blue stripes. And it's a full-on king-size bed sheet. So one could do that and have quite a lot of trimming. This was a set of curtains. And, you know, I look at that and go instantly, that's an underskirt. That's, it's also heavy cotton. It's obviously an underskirt, petticoat, figured petticoat, something like that. This is a sheet, and I almost didn't buy it because it's not cotton, it's a weird microfiber. But the print is very reminiscent of hand printed cottons for colonial and Regency garb. And again, I do lots of different time periods. So when I'm picking up fabrics, a lot of times it isn't just for one era. Again, probably this is going to be an underskirt. So this is the Renaissance haul, that same thrift store. The flowered fabric is a comforter. The striped fabric is heavy, long. I swear there's 4 of them, and each one of them is probably 12 yards. No, 12 feet, probably 3 yards, 3 or 4 yards. And it's a heavy brocaded velvet color, and it's really it's more burgundy than you see from these pictures. And then the gold down in the lower right hand side is another huge set of curtains, big drapes that are gold on gold embroidery. It's solid embroidered, and it's, you know, it's silk like, it's synthetic, but it's silk-ish. And what it said to me is, make a bigger underskirt that you can use under all kinds of eras. It could go under a Renaissance outfit, or it could go under a Civil War outfit. It could be a Civil War ball gown with 2 alternate bodices. One of those ones where you've got 120 inches around the hem. And the embroidered layer, the embroidered layer on the lower right, I look at that and I want to do a robe à la anglaise, or a robe à la française, a chemise à la française, something in the sort of 1740s region. We're looking at, you know, Marie Antoinette and all of that. But the heavy embroidered stripe wants to be a Tudor dress. It wants to be a Tudor overdress. I'm not entirely sure exactly how it's going to be yet, but that's how it's going to be. But again, each of these, the curtains were, I think, $4 a piece, and there were 4 of them. The flowered fabric is easily 6 or 7 yards. I got that at a fabric thrift store. The curtains, there's 4 of them, and they're probably 3 or 4 yards a piece, at 50 inches wide. So it's a lot of fabric, and I didn't spend $60 on it. Now, these are sheets. And I looked at it and I said, oh, wouldn't that make a pretty little colonial dress? it's plausible, but I didn't quite like it. It didn't really speak to me. So, I mean, that's how I did that. And then this is a set of king size blue flannel sheets in stripes. Now, the stripes are not historically accurate until you get probably Regency or later. But if you have ever been to Dickens Fair or Ren Fair in the wintertime or anything like that, a flannel petticoat is a godsend. This is an interesting piece. Unfortunately, it's just a valance, so it's not very big. I imagine I'll use it for a set of stays. But it is from the IKEA collection, which is the IKEA does duvet covers and certain fabric selections that are historically accurate to colonial era. Anybody who's buying from Burnley and Trowbridge, they have some of the same patterns. Excuse me. Okay, so these are some finished things that I've done, and I've done them from upcycled pants. Actually, this is actually a reversible bodice. You can see the thin cotton chemise underneath there. Those are handmade. I actually watch TV late at night and just sew them up. They're 4 pieces, 6 seams, and a drawstring casing, and they're very simple, and they go under everything for every era from the early Renaissance all the way up till practically the 20s. Anyway, on the right, you'll see that that's a scrap of upholstery fabric. The black and white stripe is a pair of pants, and the roses, which is the reverse, the whole thing is reversible, and the roses is also a pair of pants. This is going to be my mother for Hansel and Gretel. Okay, so this outfit, again, I mean, you could squeak and call it late Renaissance, but it really is like 1740s. I call it my Outlander dress. And again, the chemise that goes underneath, the stays, are upholstery fabric with a structured layer of blue jeans, boned with zip ties, and finished with hand cut sewn bias tape. Spiral lace, you'll notice the spiral laced front and back. I am a big believer. This is my one true historically accurate quirk. I do like to see courses laced correctly. And, you know, I'm opinionated about that. And anything earlier than early Victorian era should be spiral laced. So the dress is an underskirt, which is it's actually, there is a yellow curtain underskirt underneath that's got the front half and the back half overlap so that they have a place for pockets. Then it's got the upholstery fabric that's the bodice, the matching busk, and the overdress is curtains. And the interesting thing I think about this is that I was going to put the lacings on it, and we've all seen the Outlander pattern. Somebody's using it for something. I saw on the site somebody's using the pattern. The pattern runs short, so I added, I think, 1.5 inches to it actually. But it shows it laced up. And I was watching a video of one of Abby Cox's videos, and I noticed that she didn't lace it up at all. She actually, it's all pinned with straight pins, and that's actually historically accurate, which I was really happy to see because I was too lazy to put a lacing on it. Because this being on the outside, I probably would have done the lacings by hand. I've only just recently learned how to make eyelet holes by hand. And I can do it pretty fast, but you know. This last dress, this is actually my, when I finally started doing the research to do truly a Tudor dress. This dress actually competed in the professional category in the costume competition in Dragon Con. But it's actually a Franken dress. It's all about what it looks like in the silhouette. And that's one of the things I really want to emphasize, is that all of these fabrics and all of these looks, depending on how accurate you want to be, it's all about the shape. This is actually the base dress underneath this is actually a prom dress from the 80s. I took it apart and put it back together. The underskirt is a vintage, the striped velvet taffeta there is a vintage fabric from my grandmother's collection. Yes, my grandmother was one of those people who believed that she who dies with the most fabrics wins. And I think she might have won a little bit. It's a silk taffeta with a silk velvet stripes. You can't even get fabric like that anymore. The pink velvet was a set of curtains. The chemise was a raw silk curtain. And I don't remember what I took the lace from. And of course, costume jewelry and the pearls aren't real and all of that. I hope this is giving you some ideas and perhaps some inspiration. I use upcycled fabrics for many reasons. One of them is ethical. It keeps fabric out of the landfill. I use plain sheets for almost every mock-up and every lining. Modern clothing from natural fabrics can be recut to use with historical silhouettes. And I just get inspired by stuff. I also recently acquired a huge lot of vintage fabric from someone cleaning out his mom's house. There's all this craft stuff. You want it? Yes, yes, I do. It included a bolt of embroidered silk. Maybe I'm a bit of a hoarder, but I really do make costumes from almost everything that I have. What you're seeing here in this picture is maybe half of the costume collection. I actually cleaned, sorted, and organized. And these are just costumes. Lots of eras, lots of, well, the Renaissance ones, of course, take up a lot of room. But Victorian, Pioneer, Regency, and then various kinds of modern. I have a couple of dresses. I have a bunch of vintage stuff from my grandmother. Anyway, so I'm going to come back to the Zoom if I can figure out how to. Okay, that's here. Stop sharing my screen. So if anybody's got any questions or comments, or you want to share your hoard, some.
Nellie, I have a question for you. Do you I assume you buy at fabric stores when you can't find something in a thrift store to repurpose. Do you do any online shopping?
Very little. The only fabric that I buy online is something that I absolutely know what is, and it's usually, am I allowed to tout actual places? I buy from Dharma.
Sure, you can.
Dharma Trading has beautiful raw fabrics. They're primarily a dyeing house, so they do their own dyings and things like that. But they have beautiful fabrics. I made my daughter's wedding dress. It was hand embroidered, hem to shoulder, out of a hemp silk charmeuse that was just absolutely gorgeous. But what I did from there is I actually bought their full sample pack. So I have examples of all of their fabrics. And if I'm gonna buy, I also buy occasionally from JR Silks when I can afford it. But again, I always get swatches before I get them. But mostly not. Mostly I don't go to fabric stores very often, and when I do, it is for things like thread. which I haven't figured any other way to get.
Okay, anybody else got questions for Nellie? Be sure to unmute yourself and jump in.
Mhm.
We want this to be interactive.
I have a question. Sorry if you answered this, I was about 10 minutes late, but I was just wondering, I've been doing a lot of thrifting of things like, I've been looking for velvet curtains specifically. And I was wondering if you had kind of a gauge for like, what can 2 panels make? Or like, when do I need to hold out for 4 panels or 2 panels? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, part of that is, I mean, like with the stripes, you're going to want more because you need more for matching stripes. See, I do a lot of mixing and matching fabrics, if that makes any sense. So, I mean, I'll pick up, if it's a fabric that I like, I'll pick it up because who knows, probably in the stash or down the line, there's something that'll go with it if it's not enough to do that on its own. I'm a great believer in, you know, fidgeting your yardage to make it do what you want it to do. I mean, there's no reason why you have to have 180 yards around the hem of your hoop skirt. You can have 140, it's fine.
all right, thank you.
Mm.
Do we have other questions?
So, just because I happen to be sitting here and the mannequins are right here for one of the shows I'm working on is Hansel and Gretel, which is only vaguely Renaissance-y. I mean, it's pretty fantasy. But let's see if I can didn't actually photograph these, but so here's my Gretel. She's pretty distinctively, I mean, that's like a German dirndl. It actually is a real German dirndl. And again, the white chemise that goes under everything. But for my Sandman, I don't know if you're familiar with Hansel and Gretel, the opera, but we're putting the Sandman in a upcycled, recut tailcoat. And I'm going to put some stars on it. But that's, you know, one of the things that I do is I'll take an extent garment and I'll recut it so that it serves a different purpose. Like this one, this bodice used to be a skirt and 2 pairs of blue jeans. Because, you know, you get your fabric wherever you can find it. And yes, the painting behind me is a magic card.
Okay, you have a question in the chat, Nellie. Can you see the chat right now?
No, I can't. Let me see if I can pull it up.
I can read it to you if you want.
Yeah, if you would. I don't
Okay.
see how to do that.
What do you do with the lining? A lot of drapes come with. I'm tempted by some stuff, but daunted by the task of I guess removing it all.
Oh, I sit and watch TV and pull it out. A lot of times you can just rip it off.
Yeah, I've done that too.
The thread is usually fairly fragile. So I mean, if you get it started and where it's double stitched or anything, and then just give it a good tug, a lot of times it'll just come loose. The linings, I actually often use the linings depending on what they are. I use the linings as linings. I'll make my mock-up of something out of the lining of the curtains that I'm going to make it out of. Because almost any of these like big heavy costumes, they're all flat lined.
And for those who don't know what that means, can you explain what flatlining is?
Sure. Particularly if you're doing something like a corset or a bodice that needs to fit, I make a mock-up first out of just about anything really. And then to reinforce and stiffen the material, particularly if it's a little bit fragile or if it's something that tends to fray, I take the individual pieces of the lining or of the mock-up, take it apart, cut out the fashion fabric, they tend to call it, and then I sew them both together. You know, I don't sew it and flip it or anything like that. I just sew it together so it's like one piece of fabric. And you'll find if you start looking at extant historical garments, particularly like Victorian garments, almost everything is done that way. They don't do like turned linings the way that we would normally think to turn a lining. They're mostly all flat lined, which is a lot easier than turning a lining, actually.
We actually had a couple people join us in the last 5 minutes. So anyone
Oh
else
dear.
have any questions? Just so you know, we will be putting this Zoom recording on our YouTube channel. And as soon as we have that available, we'll be putting the YouTube link out so that you can go back and watch what you've missed so far. But right now we're just having a conversation about how to use and how to find upcycled fabrics. So jump right in if you have any questions.
One of the things I wanted to mention was that some of the earliest printed fabrics that we have, again, not necessarily Renaissance, but most Ren festivals are pretty flexible and sometimes there's time travelers. But the silks that saris are made out of are often printed in a very old and traditional fashion, so that they actually are really close to historically accurate. And if you buy a sari, it's 5.5 yards plus the piece that's supposed to be made into the top, which is kind of nice. Like this skirt, for instance, is made from a sari. I've used it for a couple of peasant shows. It may actually go on the Mother for Hansel and Gretel with, you know, black velvet bodice and looking like various ethnic costume outfit kind of things. All righty, well, let's go on out there and hit the thrift stores. Don't let that fabric go to waste.
All right, here's a last call for questions or comments, or if anyone wants to share their experiences in finding and upcycling.
Yeah, what's the best thing you ever found? I want to know.
That's a great question.
What's your favorite fabric that you ever found?
I can start with that. We have a Yule Ball that we hold every year, a sort of fantasy historical costume ball that we do. And I've made 2 of my gowns out of pieces of upcycled sari. So yeah, I'm all about that.
I found 4 panels of washable cotton velveteen. And I had been wanting to make my brother a full-length cloak as a gift, which obviously that's a lot of fabric. So I found that for I want to say it was $12.50 at a thrift store. So he got like a full cloak for $12.50.
Oh, the cotton velveteen is lovely too, because it's both warm and not warm. I mean, yeah, it's one of the things that kind of is dual purpose that way.
Yeah, I'm gonna hem it tonight and then that'll be done. So late Christmas present for him.
Yeah, I mean, beyond this recent thrift store run, I've been helping clean out a house for a woman who was a lifelong crafter and fabric hoarder, and her family's like, what are we going to do with all this stuff? And my friend and I are both like, we'll just take care of it, okay? But when she and it's like this, they just pull all the stuff out of the room and pile it on the table and say, take what you want. And we say, okay, we'll take all of it and take care of it. If we don't want it, we'll take it to the thrift store or whatever. In this pile, we just did this like 2 days ago. In this pile was an entire bolt. I think it's a 10-yard bolt of embroidered bright pink silk. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I mean, I think it's a 10-yard bolt. It doesn't look like it's been cut at all. So I'm probably going to go for the Civil War gown. The 180 hem. Make a Cinderella gown out of it. For no particular purpose, but just because I think it'd be fun. You think with all the costumes I have, I'd spend more time dressed up. I really don't. Oh, by the way, the dress that I'm wearing is actually oh, come on.
Well, we lost your video, but we do have another question in the chat. Any recommendations for corduroy uses?
Actually, my favorite use for corduroy is as lining for hats, because weirdly enough, there we go. That's back. Because weirdly enough, if you put corduroy on the inside of a hat or bonnet, it stays on your head a whole lot better. But it's good for structure. It's good for anything you need structure for. So yeah, this dress that I'm wearing is actually made out of sheets by hand, because I was at my mother's house and bored. So I just basically took the sheets and made a dress out of them. But yeah, I don't know. See, corduroy is a fairly modern fabric. The unwaled corduroy can actually pass as velvet. But you're not going to get, you're going to get into like the Victorian stuff if you want to be at all historically accurate. But if you don't care, like I say, it's really good for lining things that you want to be warm, like big heavy like men's coats, because it stays where it's put because of the ridges. Trying to think what else have I used it for. I don't know, it's nice and sturdy, structural. Oop. Hey, Missy.
Okay, any other questions or comments or things that you want to share about what you have upcycled? Jump right in, and if not, then we'll wrap this up, but we'd love to hear from you. Oh, we got another comment. I was gifted 7 yards of upholstery fabric, a friend cleaning it out, so nice gift.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd head for the Outlander dresses in that one. Lots of ruffles, Marie Antoinette, you know.
If you cool. Can, this is Janie. If you can allow me to share the screen, I can show you a picture of that.
I think you did. But
oh, I did. Okay, it showed
yeah.
up. Oh, I didn't realize it showed up. Yay!
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was matching. There was matching taffeta in 3 shades of green. So
wow.
for underskirt and such.
Yeah, I've got it.
Cool.
I've got it so that anyone can share their screen. So right now we're seeing house.
Dogwoods. Beautiful, beautiful dogwoods. So wherever that is, their spring is at least closer than mine. I still got snow on the ground.
That was last April. I just left it up. That's my background there. But yeah, the fabric had 7 yards of the upholstery fabric plus another remnant, and then 3 different shades of green taffeta look. It's not actually taffeta, but it has the appearance of. So I'm thinking underskirt in the green and lining of sleeves in green, and big sleeves on a big dress.
Well, you could do the like the Marie Antoinette type ruffle trim with your taffeta would be pretty cool too.
Oh yeah, I've got yards of trim. Yeah, of ruffles.
Yeah. I recommend a ruffler for that.
I have one. Actually, I have several.
Nellie,
And
how do you organize your fabrics?
Beg your pardon?
How do you organize your fabrics? Do you do
I
them
don't.
by content or by color or?
Well, like you see the one bin there, there were, I put like things together when I get that far. The absolute honest truth is that I am perpetually buried under a pile of fabric. Up in my studio. I mean, I've actually moved my studio down to my living room, A, because it was cold up there, and B, because I've got 3 shows running and I just don't have room up there to rack 3 shows. But literally a third of the room is literally, and I mean this literally, a shoulder high pile of fabric. And surprisingly enough, I mean, fabric and things that I have filed as to be made into something else. This is nice fabric, but it's a 1970s boxy suit with shoulder pads. Surprisingly enough, I know more or less where things are, but I do a fair amount of digging. Or archaeology, if you want to look at it that way.
How about anybody else?
Currently, there are 4 mannequins in my living room. My couch is half covered with fabric. I have a table with 3 sewing machines on it over on that side with 3 or 4 large bins of fabric that are all black and white because part of my show, the Kiss Me Kate show, is Shakespearean, but in black and white graphic patterns. So I've actually been posting a fair number of those, but anyway, it's all in piles.
How about anybody else? Because I have rearranged my fabric so many times, by color, by content, like I've got all the silks together, by project, and every time I do, I find that I can't find just what I want. So I'm always looking for new ways to organize my fabrics.
I just need a really good friend that likes to organize.
I guess I do too.
I know. I'll keep them supplied in margaritas. It'd be great. My problem is actually when I start sorting the fabric, it's like I'll find something that reminds me I was going to do this with that, and then I go off down that rabbit hole, and the sorting doesn't get sorted. I was actually very proud of myself that I actually got the costumes themselves sorted the other day. Sorted and binned, for that matter. But that doesn't, take into account the fact that there's 3 racks of costumes in my garage, 1 rack downstairs by my washing machine, and another rack in my dining room. Luckily, I live alone. Well, with the cats and the dog. Alrighty then.
All right, well, if no one else has any comments or questions, we will wrap this up. And thank you very much, Nellie, for sharing your costume.
My horde.
It's a costume world. I do theater costumes too, so I understand.
Right.
I had the most ambitious one that I did was How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and I built 80 costumes for that. And that was, but I had a lot of help from my friends, so it was fine. But anyway.
Yeah, 78 is the biggest show I've done.
Yeah, this was crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, we will wrap this up and we'll get it out on YouTube. And thank you everyone for participating. And thank you, Nellie, for leading us.
Yeah, and if you have questions, just find me on the webpage. I'm always around.
All right.
Find me on the Facebook page. All right. Thank you all.